Hey everyone, welcome into CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news show. I'm your host, Tyler Piper, and of course, joining me as always to my left, we welcome in Scott Lewer. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm pretty good, Tyler. How are you doing?
Doing very well. So we've got a pretty interesting topic that we're going to be discussing today. You know, increasing number of organizations across North America, really expanding their clientele base worldwide, all over the place, really. Now, in this episode in particular, CMS Connected, we're going to be talking about globalization, which right now is becoming one of the top trends in the space, really, if you will. Kind of give me your brief thoughts very quickly.
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, you're right. It's definitely come about. I mean, globalization has been here forever, but it's really becoming much more relevant to the mainstream now, to the mainstream folks who are trying to engage with their audiences. They're looking at that way to really tie in and gain their audience and be relevant to their audiences. So it's one of the ways, and it's pretty complex. It seems simple, but we'll talk today about some of the real complexities of it and how many different variations there are and approaches to it.
And just how fast it has really kind of burst onto the scene.
Really,
that's the most important part of it all. Now, that's not all that we have for today. We all obviously want to, first and foremost, thank our sponsors who make this entire thing really actually happen up to this point. First off, we've got Falcon Software. Falcon actually provides web creative, e-commerce, content management, social media, and mobile solutions for organizations across the globe, as well as Digital Clarity Group. DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. Now, also joining us a little bit later on, we're going to be having Ali Kelly, the Director of Global Marketing at Lionbridge, and a little later on the show, we're going to have Tim Walters, also of Digital Clarity Group, taking over this show right now it is. But of course, we got to kick things off the only way we know how, and that is in fact with some of the news from the CMS industry. So let's go ahead and let's get right to it. Now, worldwide IT spending is what we're going to be discussing first. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, wait a minute, are we going to be talking politics about this? No, we're actually going to see exactly what this means for you. Worldwide IT spending is really set to grow 3% in 2012 compared to 2011. Now that according to new statistics from Gartner. Now Gartner's latest 2012 global IT spending forecast is $3.6 trillion compared to, well, $3.5 trillion last year, and up slightly from Gartner's previously released 2012 IT spending forecast of about 3.58. So Scott, right now, this is kind of a surprise considering all the turmoil that we're looking at, you know, in European markets and everything that we hear day to day, especially with elections and so on and so forth. What's really driving this upward trend at this point in time?
Look, so I won't
put
take
your
the,
politics.
I won't even attempt to take the political stance either, and I'm certainly no economist. But I'll put my IT hat on for you. And you know, I think one of the things that they point out in an article that we referenced here was that enterprise software is one of the largest drivers of this kind of increase in significant in IT spend. It's around enterprise software. And I think we've talked about on this show the relevance of the cloud and how that's continuing to significantly grow in this space, and folks are looking to it more and more. We saw in 2012, Gartner quotes the expansion of the cloud consuming 20% of that growth of enterprise software, right? So we've seen it grow from like somewhere around $91 billion a year to $109 billion a year. So that's pretty significant. So we've talked about this cloud point before, but I think we're really seeing the numbers now come out and talk about how really much this is fueling it.
Now, one of the things that I hate about these kinds of numbers in particular, you could do it in any industry. Oh, it's going to be a billion-dollar industry. It's going to be a trillion-dollar industry. This is IT we're talking about here. I mean, this is, how broad of a market are we actually talking about here? I mean, this is crazy when we're talking about IT in general, really.
You know, so that's actually, it's a really interesting point, Tyler, because I think, and I talked about this someone earlier just before the show when we were talking about this exact statistic, and he said to me, well, you know, how much of that is actually being spent by IT? So we're talking about IT spend, meaning, okay, enterprise software is a category of IT.
I was going to say, that's just a portion. That's a piece of the pie.
But how much of it is IT spend, meaning money spent on IT things, issues, versus spent by IT. And I think that's an interesting component of it, is especially as we start to shift to the cloud, we're seeing more and more this notion of the business being able to now provide for themselves, right? Because it's less dependent on that IT team. It's no longer this on-premise installation of software that they're supporting. It's more easy to go out as a business person, get said service, offer it, serve it up, and it's more, the focus is now on the application and the offering that it's providing you. So I think it's interesting that I think a lot of the IT spend is now being not necessarily being spent by IT.
Now, as far as WCM is concerned, really, does this affect the industry at all? I mean, what effect does this number? I mean, do we look at it and say, okay, great, this means good for us, we're going to be growing as well, or what?
I mean, we've said, you know, IT spend, what I'm seeing with both in terms of the, I mean, I think I've had, just this week alone, 3 prospective clients come to us and talk about, can we help them with their selection of a CMS tool? And that's pretty interesting. I mean, it's really alive and well. And one of the things that we caution them about is how we have to really partner with their prospective vendors out there, because these guys are getting RFPs left, right, and center from folks who are looking to spend money in this area. So it's been alive and well for the past couple of years, where the rest of the economy might have been hit a little bit harder. I think CMS and WCM specifically, a lot of folks are turning to it as a kind of macro version of, in the same way they're returning to globalization and those sorts of things. I mean, digital marketing and just .com in general, your stores and storefronts and that kind of stuff are turning to their .coms to kind of get their source of revenue now. So I think, live and well, WCM, for sure.
Good to hear. All right, another company that is always live and well is Oracle, and that's what I want to go ahead and discuss and talk about right now. Oracle, you know, social marketing. It's interesting to see exactly what's taking place with them right now. But let's go to an article in particular that came out a couple weeks ago, July 11. David Rowe, he actually posted a blog post on CMS Wire that only a few weeks after it bought Vitru and Collective Intellect, Oracle basically been busy again in the space, especially social acquisition more than anything. This time it's the turn of Involver and its cloud-based social marketing solution. Now, leaving aside the fact that Oracle doesn't really seem to have released an official statement about this acquisition just yet, I'm anxious to kind of get your thoughts on this, because right now we're seeing them continue on. They're continuing to say, we're going to move to that social path, that social enterprise, if you will. Kind of talk from your experience, your thoughts on this in particular.
You know, an interesting point was the way that article started, where David talked about that, was that he was surprised at the pace at which Oracle has made these acquisitions. That they've continued to,
they're
grow through
them
acquisition.
Up left and right.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's not a surprise to me at all, right?
Really?
I mean, Oracle's huge. They can buy whatever
the heck
they want, and they've proved that. They bought, you know, FatWire this time last year, whatever. So they can buy whatever they want. I think the big question is not the pace at which they can acquire companies, but the pace at which they can integrate those products that they're buying, right? And so even just a couple of weeks ago, they announced their new customer experience management suite and all that sort of stuff. And Tim Walters, who's going to be on later and works with my group, wrote the most recent blog post on our site about kind of, you know, how sweet is said suite? How well is it integrated underneath? What is at the center of that? And how have they leveraged some of those kind of major parts that they've got as the underlying basis? Is CRM the center of that? Is the FatWire web content management system the center of that? So what is the center of the universe for them, and how well are they integrating these products? I think that's the real question here.
Well, I think a lot of people are also looking to this in comparison with Salesforce. I mean, right? I mean, especially Oracle's CEO, you know, Larry Ellison, comes out and says, we're going to leave them in the dust. I mean, back and forth, can they actually do that? I mean, is that possible? Can they leave Salesforce, which is massive as well, can they leave them in the dust?
Look, I think there's no, and it's so funny that we've talked about Salesforce.
It seems like the last couple of shows,
they really have been, you know, in this area an awful lot more. They're really, we said that they were going to, I said they were going to be relevant, and they certainly are in this space. I think the thing for me is that, look, Oracle, no question, from the standpoint of an enterprise offering, to be able to create this customer experience suite, they've gotten out of the gates far faster than Salesforce ever did. They've got some serious underlying products, right? They've got ATG for e-commerce. They've got Endeca now for enterprise search. I mean, those things, they can't even be touched. You know, they also have FatWire, which is a significant web content management system underlying and fueling the websites that they're powering. Whereas, you know, a Salesforce has, you know, what they call site.com, which is a very light web content management tool. So while, you know, at the level of just kind of reading articles and you see, oh, they're playing in a lot of the same space, look, really, you know, the acquisitions themselves are pretty significantly different. Where Salesforce has definitely beat Oracle to the punch is in the social space, and obviously in the cloud space. They beat everybody in the cloud.
Yeah.
So we're seeing Oracle do a lot more push, and even this purchase here, Involver, is another product that's out in the cloud, and so we see Oracle making more of their integrating that into their Oracle Cloud presence, which is relatively, at least compared to SFDC, new for them. So, and also in social, we saw them purchase Vitru a little while ago, and now we see this Involver purchase, and so they're definitely trying to shake things up and try to keep pace in the social space where really a lot of the innovation is happening.
Okay, well, let's continue to move on with this conversation. Let's actually move on to the next topic we're to go to is agility. Now, again, on July 11th, another post. Now, this is interesting. July 11th just must have been the day for news. Pam Baker actually posted an article on fierce content management. That Agility CMS is getting out of the custom development game and shifting the bulk of that work to its recently expanded partner network instead. Now, the company has already begun transitioning project management over to their partner network, who's going to be primarily stepping in on maintenance of websites and implementation of website features. Now, actually, in a recent press release, Jonathan Voigt, co-founder and CTO of Agility, stated that, quote, "This transition will free us up to focus on our new product developments geared for magazines and media companies." End quote. And then he picks up again. He says, "While we will no longer be doing custom development work, we remain the only content management system vendors that stays involved for the life of a deployment through our architecture and deployment support services." Scott, what's your thoughts on this shift really for Agility?
So I think it's a good thing for them, especially because Agility is a pretty small company. I think they're Toronto-based or somewhere up in Canada. They're a very small company. They've got a great innovative product, but to try to, hey, look, they're like the story of many. They had their own product. They were serving their customers with that as a services company, and they basically productized it, and now they started selling it off. And so I like the notion that when vendors kind of know what they're good at and they invest in the product aspects of their business so that it can grow. So that's what they're looking to fuel them. And I think they're too small to try to, you've got people who, do I work on the product itself or do I go work with this client's implementation? So I think when you're having to debate those issues, then you need to focus one way or the other. I think, though, generally this is a micro version of a macro issue that many of the CMS vendors are struggling with right now. We see vendors like Bridgeline, who we've talked about before, that does a lot of its own services as well. They're kind of a larger version of an Agility, of a former one. And then you've got others that are kind of on the other end of the extreme who do services pretty much only through the partner channel, like a Sitecore, right? And then all in between. And I think they're really struggling with that because they want to be able to leverage the advantages of the partner network. They want the partner network to be able to sell them into prospective customers. They want to be able to use them to scale pretty significantly, that sort of thing. But the downside of that is those partners might manage a suite of products. They don't necessarily only work with their stuff, and so they don't know it nearly as well as their own team does. And so therefore the experiences of their customers ultimately is completely dependent on the integrators and the folks who are implementing the product. And oftentimes that's what gives a bad name potentially to the products themselves.
How much stock do you put into that part of the quote where he says he's going to be focusing on developments geared towards magazines and media companies? When right now most companies are creating a lot of content. Magazines and media companies, they're content heavy. How much stock do you put into that?
I like that as well for them, especially given their product and some of the things that it's good at. For me, to be able to be vertically focused where you actually kind of offer a solution set to a particular vertical in the market and say, hey, we specialize in what it is that you guys do, especially for a small company with a relatively small client base, I think that's a great move for them to do. That is in their wheelhouse. That is some of the first customers who came out of the gate on their product. And so to be able to focus on that and add significant advantages for them that are really honed in on them, that allows them to do well. I think that's a great, given where they are in terms of their kind of life cycle as a vendor, it's really nice, rather than oftentimes what you end up having is a vendor that's far more mature trying to figure out how to get to that next level and how to grow their product even more. Then they go try to refocus. At this point, they've found some great key customers that can really drive their innovation to be tailored to to a particular vertical. It's nice.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's talk about one of your favorite topics. I know. Let's talk about SharePoint right now. Now, on July 16th, I always have to bring that up. Then we saw the release of the public beta, the next generation of SharePoint and Office technology, codenamed Wave 15, and it's set to be released as SharePoint 2013. Now, a couple of the improvements, and the major improvements: content authoring for multilingual sites, variations now used exclusively; managed navigation, user-friendly URLs, content search web part, faceted navigation. Those are just a couple. So, what do you think of Wave 15, if you will?
So it's interesting. I'm just pondering on what you said, that, where you said, this is your favorite topic. And I guess that means that I beat up SharePoint a lot, and I don't. I think that's what you mean by that, and I sure don't mean to do that, because it certainly serves a great purpose. It's just one of those things that it's the 800-pound gorilla. It's the elephant in the room all the time.
Yeah.
That you've got the CIO or whatever telling your marketing team or whoever's driving the selection of the new WCM, go look at SharePoint because we've already got it in the enterprise, figure out a way to use it, so to speak. And it's not the best fit for many of these. Look, one of the authors of the articles that you referenced, and many others as well, have harped on, oh yes, SharePoint 2013 is now here. It's going to really serve the needs of the web content content management market. And I go back to this debate, the rant that I had.
I was going to say, which one is it? Yeah.
The rant that I had, was it last month or the month before, where I took some time to earn a beer over somebody in the market that basically was saying that the basis of content management, web content management, has been commoditized, and we've done all we can do there, and it's all about the presentation. And my point then and my point now is, it's not just all about the presentation, although that's the kind of fun stuff. And that's why some of these article writers, and even the things that you listed off, I mean, you talked about, name some of those, navigation and the user-friendly URLs and
content
SEO.
search web part, faceted navigation, content authoring.
Yeah, so a lot of that is, again, it's about that experience of the audience. And while that's wonderful, and that helps them keep pace on some areas, the problem that I have with SharePoint is not in its ability to keep pace with some of those, although it was, but it's really about the underlying lack of complexity there in terms of how the content is stored and managed. So metadata, which drives personalization, very weak on that. Content architecture, very weak on that. I mean, we're talking about entire pages and sites having to be done. When you're trying to personalize a particular page for somebody and be relevant to someone like you, or you come onto the site and I want to show you some content that's specific to you based on your behaviors, they can't do that. They've got to show you a completely different page. So it's some of that underlying architecture that I go back to, that they didn't really change the product's underlying architecture. They just changed some of the features, which is nice. It's great. And so I guess what this means, and I'll get off the soapbox here in a second, but I guess what this means is, if you're still using SharePoint and still planning to use SharePoint for relatively simple sites, not these whole customer, then it's great. And now you've got some more tools and some more things to make that easier for you. But it doesn't change the nature of the types of sites that SharePoint can manage. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely, definitely. So we're running a little behind right now. We're actually going to get to the next
That's my fault.
It's ranting again. It's the way it works now. We do have to get to the very last segment of the news, and we're going to be talking about Alfresco. Alfresco, well, undoubtedly, been growing at a pretty impressive rate over the last 7 years, really through a combination, whether it's products or strategic partnerships. Now, according to Alfresco, their partnership with Kodak, which was announced just a couple of weeks ago, will enable them to offer better content and document management services through Alfresco's enterprise content management system. Now, while Alfresco looks to make considerable gains from this partnership, how does Kodak actually benefit through this partnership, Scott? Because Kodak needs to start benefiting from a few things right now.
Look, they do, and one of the areas that, I think it's more obvious why, like you said, what's in it for Alfresco. They get, Kodak is great in the notion of they've kind of shifted from this physical documents to now digitizing everything, right? So from a scanning perspective, that's really where their innovation was. It's all about this kind of scanning solutions and things, and that's what Kodak can really bring to bear.
Which is what they focused in on now.
Yeah,
Kodak is their printing solutions.
Sure, exactly. And so this notion of scanning, now to be able to bring that into the hands of Alfresco is is really meaningful, where they now have a really high-powered ability to be able to incorporate and ingest documents rather than having them have to be initiated in the digital world. What does it do for Kodak, to get back to your question, is it gives them this enterprise document management capability. Mm-hmm. So I like that Alfresco is continuing. They used to try to slate themselves as also a web content management system. And I used to get just as frustrated with that as I do with the SharePoint. Yep. But they're really focusing in on, look, they're very good. They, even their founder came out of Documentum and EMC and that. So they know this area very well. But for what all that brings for Kodak is that ability to manage all that document. It's not just now about scanning it in and ingesting it and converting it to digital, but it's about being able to manage that in a meaningful way, being able to store that in a meaningful way, that underlying architecture that makes it searchable and findable within the enterprise and all that sort of stuff, tagging it, all that. Now Alfresco brings that to bear for the Kodak customers.
And again, going back to Alfresco, they have to like it just for taking, like you said, a legacy brand that's been around that everybody knows. I don't think if you asked anyone, maybe a 15-year-old kid, who Kodak is, everybody knows who they are. Everybody knows what they do and what they've been able to accomplish. It's a resume builder. It goes on there saying this is a company that we have in fact worked with. So it's another boost for them.
It is, and I don't know where we are time-wise, but just take another quick second. Is I think this notion of trying to get to a paperless office and digitization of everything that's paper. There's been this wave for 10 years now to try to get rid of paper. The caution is, guess what? You can make it way more difficult for yourself to find this stuff. If you open up a folder and you're looking for a document, you know what it looks like, you know what it's going to say at the top about it. You might not even remember what it's called exactly, but you can find it. You can leaf through and get it in a filing system. When now you go digital, all that stuff is just out there, and you've got to be able to use terms that can find it. There's got to be categories that kind of cluster these documents together in a way that make them findable and usable, because now you're talking about knowledge of an organization and how people can tap into that. And if you just digitize everything kind of mindlessly without this ECM capability, this document management capability like Alfresco provides, you'll be, frankly, further behind than you were when you just had paper.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Definitely interesting thing to actually pay attention to very closely. Okay, let's go ahead and let's move on. Let's get to really the main topic of the entire show today. We're going to be talking about web globalization. It's something that has come on very, very quickly over the course of over the last several months, and people have seen this continue to come up. Now, it's essential really to a successful international website strategy. Now, companies doing business around the world really need to provide communications in the native language of their global customers, business partners, and employees. Now, this requires clear, precise, culturally relevant translations of content and products. Now, with that in mind, we obviously want to be talking to people that are used to the translation in the native language, really. So we're going to go ahead and we have to welcome in to the show Allie Kelly, the Director of Global Marketing at Lionbridge. Allie, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
It's so funny. We're so used to having Seth Gottlieb on the show, but now we're changing hats just a little bit.
Yeah, he's vacation. I guess you have to do it every once in a while.
It's much better looking than Seth also.
Oh, thanks.
There you go. That's the way it's going to work out today. Okay, so Allie, without a doubt, web globalization can be pretty painful. Can be expensive cycle, trial and error. We see this time and time again. What are some of the initial steps companies should take to help avoid many of the mistakes really that take place when we're implementing this and preparing for web content and globalization, really?
Sure. So for a company that's taking a ground-up approach from the very beginning, what they would really want to do is take a good look at where their content is now and where they're having success. Look at their content from a strategic point of view, understand what's considered branded content, what's very important to them as a company and as an organization, and then also take a look at your content in terms of what's considered to be more short shelf life or user-generated content. Another thing to really look at is understanding your technical architecture. So do you have the capability to support a multilingual global website? And even if you do have that, do you have the people that can manage it? And do they have the knowledge that they need in country to ensure that the experience is what it needs to be to have a unified global presence?
So Tyler, you talked about, you said trial and error, the trial and error in this. That brings to mind, I mean, is that really where we are in this kind of hype cycle of globalization? We said that it's the big up and coming thing, people are talking about it an awful lot. Are we really at this, are folks still really at the place where it's just trial and error right now? Is that where we're at?
No, I think, you know, and you'll hear the data geek come out in me a little bit here, but, you know, I think that the data is out there to really drive a very strategic approach. So understanding precisely where your content and how it's working, where it's working, and how people are consuming it and using it, and in which market will really drive that strategic approach. And for anyone that has, you know, business intelligence, as most organizations do now, that information's there and available. You know, also understanding how you're able to support the experience in market. And I think we were talking earlier, I gave you the example of, you know, social media. So the way people consume content around the world is very different, and the way they interact with your content is very different. In China, for example, about 40% of all online users expect a brand to participate with them or engage with them at a social level. That's not true in the Nordics or even in the US. And so understanding and making sure that you have the resources to support that experience is incredibly important.
Yeah. And I think the point that you made about kind of looking at that strategy is one, while it sounds, you know, before you said look at the data, you said you're very data driven, and look at the strategy and kind of your approach and how you're kind of embarking on this whole thing, whether it's social is a big component of your strategy in terms of reaching out to your consumers or whatever. I think we can't say enough that kind of, we talked earlier about that 101 level stuff. I think a lot of folks are really dealing with this for the first time they've had to. It's really in their face. They're seeing all their, you know, how much of their audience is coming from whatever it is, if they're US based outside of the US and that sort of stuff. We really are flattening this world pretty significantly. And so it's not all about translation though, is it? I mean, it's not all about just kind of translating content. What else is involved here?
You know, I think translation is probably the smallest piece of the pie.
Right?
Yeah, you know, absolutely. I think understanding cultural behaviors and user behavior in market is probably first and foremost the most significant factor. And understanding how you can support that and how you can ensure a globally consistent but locally relevant experience worldwide or in whatever markets you're choosing to go into is really the most important factor. Another example that we, you know, or situation that I often hear from people is that, well, they can expand and they can translate their site, but they don't have, for example, the correct currency, or they can't provide services in that market specifically. And so from a strategic level, even if you can translate or localize whatever it is that you're trying to do in that market, it still might not make the most sense in terms of market availability and accessibility to your services.
Sure. And so even, I was just thinking about an example where it's not even just about making it meaningful culturally, it's also about what content you're even deciding to serve up in the first place, even if you don't have multiple versions of it. For example, if you're, you know, trying to push swimming trunks in July, that's not relevant in Australia or someplace south of the border, right? So anyway, so I think that's interesting. So the tee-up question was, how do you kind of go about embarking on this, right? But how about for those that just have tons of content out there already, and they're looking back and they didn't take, you know, some of your best practices into consideration when they kind of started out, and they're just dealing with tons of content. How do they go through this?
Which I have to say, I think I encounter that more than,
I would imagine.
Than the previous.
Yes.
And yeah, pretty much. So, you know, in that case, to be honest with you, that's sort of a great scenario to be in, because you have content and you can look at that content, you can understand what works and what doesn't. You can look at your market behavior and how people are using your site. Are they using your mobile site? Are they using your, you know, your main site? How, you know, how they're actually engaging with your content and your site and your digital presence is really going to drive that strategic approach in terms of, one, getting all of your content to a place where you can manage it at a global scale while continuing to roll out new and additional content in a way that is effective and really viable for your organization. You can't, these days there's so much content and we're creating it all the time and in so many different formats and we're repurposing it and it's great. It's also completely cost prohibitive and there's no way you could do it in the time necessary, to meet the market demands.
I was going to say that the time thing is the thing I'm anxious to know. Talk about the process a little bit more because that's for someone, say a company that does already have a lot of content. Yep. Talk about that process. Go through it a little bit for me.
Well, like I said, in any case, whether there is an existing site in market or translated content or not, it's a totally new approach. The first thing is really goal setting. So understanding, where you want to go and why and what the true market opportunity is, what the accessibility of that market is and availability is. And what's great now is at this point, there's so many new advances in technology and in terms of managing the process of globalizing your site or your content, that there's a lot of different routes that you can take. So you can look and say, okay, this is my branded content. This I really need to make sure it is fully transcreated and localized across the board so it's precisely the same experience everywhere at every interaction. There might be plenty of short shelf life content or multimedia content that, it's just kind of there and it's relevant in that moment or for a very short period of time, and you don't have to fully translate or localize or transcreate that content in the same manner you would your branded content. And so having the ability to not just take a one-size-fits-all approach to localizing or translating, people are really able to look at the strategic importance of the market, of the content, and then say, okay, for this content, I think I'm going to go with machine translation with a human post-edit or statistical machine translation model of translation. And for this content, I'm going to translate it with my crowd. And for this content here, I'm going to have a professional globalization company translate and manage that. So the process is more complex than ever, but luckily there are so many tools and there's been so many advances in technology and the management process that it's complex, but it's also easier for the organization that's trying to globalize or localize.
I have a gazillion questions in my head.
I can see the wheels just
turning. Yeah, man, they are. They're spinning here. You might get some steam. But one of the things, just an interesting fact that I didn't know, I'm sure you're aware of, is that CAPTCHA, there's a version of CAPTCHA that actually asks you two different questions, and one is, shows you two different words. And one of them is much easier to read because it's more obvious. And the other one is they're actually using this as a way to kind of crowdsource how to, improving the ability to, to receive that data and to translate that information. And it's just the crowdsourcing notion. You mentioned that.
It is, yeah,
It's just a way to kind of add to the repository that says, this person got the first word right, so therefore it's definitely a human. Here's how they translated the second one. Put that into the knowledge base of what that is. Anyway, it's awesome. So we could talk about technology. I want to ask you a little bit about, there's a really close relationship though between governance and globalization, I'd imagine.
Absolutely.
And we've had a show about governance before, and I'm sure you could do an entirely another one. But one of the issues that people I know deal with, and my former colleague Mary LaPlante talks a lot about, is this notion of kind of decentralized autonomy versus centralized control sort of a thing, where now where you've got your content all over, managed by locales and different groups and stuff, you've got to deal with what can they control locally, what you force centrally. I guess you deal with that a lot in this area.
I do, and it's one of, I think a lot of organizations face that same challenge in multiple areas, right? So not just in sort of web management or globalization management, but even, in terms of brand management, understanding, should it be corporate driven? Should it be driven by the local markets? It's, I think in my experience, what we've seen is originally everything was basically because of the barriers and where the technology was, everything was decentralized. And then I feel like there was this shift to everything became centralized, and then it sort of moved to a hub and spoke model. And so what you ended up with was, a hodgepodge of technical architectures. And we have one client that is trying to migrate from 26 different content management platforms into one, which, it's like, it's not the easiest process. And you don't need to put everything on the same system.
And there's no right answer, right? I mean,
Right.
I was going to say, I want to
yeah.
hold the thought right now because we do have to take a very quick break, but we're going to continue the conversation about globalization. Tim Walters is actually going to be joining us. Alex, stick around. You're going to be staying with us for that one. Tim Walters of Digital Clarity Group. We're also going to be going in the spotlight as well as rapid fire with Scott Lee. All that and more coming your way in a few seconds right here, CMS Connected.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Organizations need to be more effective at catering to the personalities of their site visitors and the way they consume information. Sites need to more dynamically adjust to each site visitor to optimize their experience. Kentico EMS delivers a complete customer experience management platform that provides all of the necessary capabilities for interactive marketing, from planning and conception through optimization and execution. And lastly, analysis. Gain the insight required to analyze your marketing performance. Align the content, execution, and analytics critical for successful interactive campaigns, speeding delivery, and optimizing return on investment. With a fully integrated set of online marketing tools, Kentico EMS can improve your online marketing efforts, which allows you to focus on what's important, making your business successful. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
All right, welcome back into CMS Connected here on the Pulse Network, everyone. I'm Tyler Pyburn here with Ali Kelly and Scott Lee. Now we're all about globalization on today's show, and there's really a lot of different terms that you're hearing. You heard Ali use a few of them just a few moments ago. Two of them that you really need to be paying attention to as far as globalization is I can't even say that word. Internationalization. Say that 5 times fast. They do it for a living, that's why. And localization, those are the words that you need to know. Joining us by way of Skype right now to really discuss these two terms as well as a whole lot more, we welcome in Tim Walters, partner and principal analyst at DCG. Tim, welcome into the show. Long time no see. How you doing?
Great, Tyler. Hey, great to be here.
Good to hear. So, Tim, now let's talk about those two terms in particular. Kind of break those down for me just a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. That the fact that you had trouble even pronouncing them justifies the use of. Some people will say I-18N for internationalization because it's 18 letters between the I and the N, or L10N for localization. So let's actually begin one step earlier with translation. I want to talk about translation, localization, internationalization, and globalization. Translation is just the word-for-word substitution from one language into another, and machines can do that pretty close as well as humans can. What machines have a very hard time doing is localizing, and localizing is the process of adapting a source language to another locale. Let me say a word about what locale means, because that's also an unusual word that people first encounter when talking about globalization. Locale, spelled local with an E. The reason that you need to think about locale is that a given language, such as Spanish or French, has many different variants. Spanish, for example, has about 18 or 19 different variants, Argentine, traditional Spanish, and so forth. Or English, American English, that is US English, GB English for the UK, and so forth. And that's a good example, because if you're adapting a text or some content, you're localizing an American English source text for the UK market, you might not do any translation at all. In some cases you would, lorry for truck and so forth, but you might not do that at all. And yet you would still be localizing it. You, for example, spell localization with an S rather than a Z. or you might change the date format so the day comes before the month rather than the US style, and so forth. And then internationalization is again also prior to translation. It anticipates translation in order to make localization easier. So very often it's an engineering or a development process. So for example, when engineers are creating a new software application like a web content management solution, they want to be sure to avoid hard coding the names for the interface elements into the code, because eventually that's going to make it very difficult if you want to localize that interface into another language. It can also have to do with the development of a site. So for example, setting up site templates in a way that they can accommodate right to left languages, or they can simply accommodate much longer text characters. So very often German, for example, German terms take up more space than the English source languages.
So,
and it can also, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, hey Tim, this is Scott, how are you?
Hi, Scott.
So you're saying localization is more about the content and about whether you're translating that, making it more culturally appropriate, et cetera, and internationalization as being more about an engineering practice and setting the stage for localization, essentially, yes?
Yeah, very often, although, so for example, the other kind of engineering aspect of internationalization that's very important is content architecture. So that you're actually setting up the site, even if you're originally only going to be in one language, you're architecting the information on the site so that it can accommodate parent language or source target relationships. Right. A lot of people forget to do that, and it becomes a real pain point when they need to add 1 or 5 or 10 or 25 more languages to a site that they've already, they've implemented 2 years before. However, internationalization isn't always an engineering question, because you can also attend to the language that you're using, that is, that your editors or your marketers are using. So again, if I have an English language source text and it says he was swinging for the fences, that kind of sports metaphor or colloquialism doesn't make any sense in virtually any other language. So one, you'd have to go to the work of localizing that. But from an internationalization perspective, you can avoid that work by already anticipating and making sure that you don't use colloquialisms or unusual figures of speech when you're creating content.
So, I actually wanted to ask you a little bit too about differentiating internationalization from globalization, because I think those are also two different. But for sake of time, I want to talk a little bit about the other confusing aspects of this, more the in practice, aspects, as opposed to just how to differentiate these terms as much. We've heard a lot about things like content marketing and serving up as a subject matter expert for your audience as a way to be relevant to them. How does that play in here when you're talking about now going global, where that sort of a practice, it seems to me, would be very locale specific and audience specific? Now when you're globalizing, how do you deal with that? Or localizing, how do you deal with that?
Good question, and I'm sorry I may repeat something that Ali said because I missed a little bit of her section of the show. This is one of the most confusing software spaces that I've encountered in 6 years or so as an analyst. I get an unbelievable number of calls, inquiry calls from people who are just saying, help us begin to understand what this process is going to be like and understand the market and what are other people doing. And very often my answer is other people are calling me and asking me what other people are doing. And it's a great opportunity, just as a side note, it's a great opportunity here for one of the vendors or more than one of the vendors to really appear as a trusted advisor by trying to go out and help people become educated, help people become oriented in this space without talking about your product's solution or the superiority approach. Just, basically, here's what's going on and here's how you can understand it. It's kind of like globalization for dummies. I think that people would really appreciate that if a vendor, kind of took their hand and helped them in this space. So the question here is, you're absolutely right. Globalization is hard enough by itself. I mean, it was hard enough when it was simply, as it were, quote unquote, a question of turning a decent sized website into 1 or 5 or 25 additional languages. But now we're moving from those relatively straightforward types of websites into extremely complicated and segmented sites, moving from one size fits all into some kind of customer experience approach, or maybe into a systems of engagement approach. And now you start talking about things like content marketing. We're using content assets to engage a prospect or engage a prospective customer and carry them right through the entire customer lifecycle, and till they're an enthusiastic advocate for the brand, and kind of weaving the right narrative with those content assets that are just precisely appropriate to where the prospect or the customer is in that life cycle. And that's hard enough in one language. But when you need to try to tackle localizing content marketing, localizing those storytelling elements and those narratives that you're orchestrating for a particular segment of your customer base, not just for your entire site, of course, but for potentially many different segments in many different campaigns in many different areas of your market. And trying to localize that is a tremendous new challenge that kind of layers on top of the base challenge of translation, localization, and globalization.
Gotcha. Man, sounds like you should, I think you should write a paper on that, plug. Let me just bring Ali back in. I think we've just got a minute left on this segment. I want to ask you, one of the things we're also talking an awful lot about is incorporating the use of video and other things like that that are much more engaging themselves. How do you deal with that? So do you just have to do lots of videos, and now it's about managing what you kind of serve up? I mean, it seems like we're talking out of two sides of our mouths here. It's like, make it all relevant, but then it's just, to your point earlier, you got to make tons and tons more content.
I was going to say, your videos are, you talk about video. Video is all about talking to that audience. You're talking to every day.
Are we localizing with this show? Are we going to start talking
I'll make it short just for the sake of time. There are two real sort of approaches to that. One is subtitling, and there are a few companies, .sub, Fly Media, that have some great technology that will integrate right with YouTube or whatever outlet it is, and allows you to translate your and professionally, or take different approaches to translation, the content in a subtitling way. There is also the approach of understanding how to architect or produce videos or multimedia so that they're easily localizable. There aren't a lot of cultural references or sort of anything that would be offensive or not, or that would be difficult to put into another.
Have I been offensive?
I was going to say, we got to start doing our homework more for the folks.
We have a lot of talking
going on. That's one thing to pay attention to. Hey, Tim, got to say, honestly, thank you so much for coming on, joining us again here at CMS-Connected. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Take care.
Awesome. And of course, big thanks to Tim Walters, Digital Clarity Group. And Ali, thank you so much for dropping by the show as well, taking time out of the busy day.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great being here.
It's great.
Excellent. Good conversations, as always, right here on CMS Connected. But we do, in fact, have to move on. And today we're going to be going in the Spotlight segment. And today we're going to be talking about .NET Nuke. Now, .NET Nuke has become one of the most popular and formidable open source .NET contenders in the CMS market today, powering over 700,000 production websites, really worldwide. And it's offered in a free community edition and subscription-based professional edition starting at just under $3,000, and enterprise edition starting right around $5,000. Now, we're going to be talking about this and really breaking this entire piece down. Now, some of the things to kind of note about .NET Nuke: year founded 2006, worldwide headquarters, San Mateo, California. They've got around 70 employees right now. Number of customers is 1,800 plus commercial customers, and about 7 million plus downloads, give or take. Now, marquee customers: CIBC, Verizon, Lockheed Martin, Canon, Hilton, NASA, just to really name a few. Some of the flagship product, the professional edition V6.2 released 6.2 released on May 2012, and some of the latest news regarding them is DNN recently updating their CMS to support enhanced social capabilities. Now, you don't want to hear me talk about this. Of course, to give us an in-depth look at DNN is Stephen Medvey from Falcon Software. Welcome to the show, Stephen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tyler. Thank you for having me on the show, and I'm looking forward to just jump in and speak about .NET Nuke.
Okay, Stephen, let's kind of break it down for us a little bit. Kind of give us a breakdown of the products in particular.
Okay, you bet. So my overall impression of .NET Nuke, this really is a product for organizations who want to deal with a web presence to get it up quickly and easily. What I find is extremely good about DNN, it is an extremely administrative, user-friendly WCMS out of the box. Now, while the functionality is okay overall, the bigger picture here is the ability to plug into a very large and successful committed community. There's over 1 million members, as you had said, as well as the fact they have a DNN store. You can download over 10,000 modules, applications, or skins. This really will help you find a solution that will probably get you 95% past your problem. So as you had mentioned, 700,000 websites that are using the DNN framework. It is Microsoft's .NET, the largest Microsoft .NET WCMS to date. It's reached the Gartner's Magic Quadrant for 2011 as that niche product in the bottom left-hand corner. There's 3 product versions. So you first have the community version. This is a free open source community. It's been around a little bit longer than 2006. It's been around since 2002. The professional version, which is about 3,000 to 5,500 per license per instance, and really depends on your support, as well as the enterprise edition, which is 5,500 to 8,500. There's a complete upgrade path through each version. If you have a web farm, be prepared that each instance for each server you'll need to pay for per license. So in the community edition, as well as all the other ones, there's a really easy community content management. So there's a new admin console ribbon bar that gives you admin, host, module, pages, and a tools panel, and also gives you that basic permission settings. It comes with the rich text editor from Telerik. It has basic file management. It has more advanced file management for professional. It now has cloud compatible, comes with in the cloud, is compatible with Windows Azure. It has an open API if you need to customize any integrated storage services. The other portion of this, it does support cloud storage with Amazon S3 as well as Windows Azure. There is a mobile API for the Community Edition. With the Professional Edition, there is a mobile website development and management tool. It comes with a built-in mobile website template. You're probably going to want to customize that a little bit, but outside of that, it comes with Google Analytics Pro for your mobile site traffic. It has a mobile site previewer, so if you want to see what it looks like in an iPhone and iOS versus any of the other Windows mobile devices, you can. The big 6.2 release is a social networking capability. You can now create social groups. You can join them, browse them, manage social groups. This is for building your online social community. You can do this for an external web marketing campaign if you're looking for more of an internet feel, an internal communications discussion community. You can set up your personal profile. You can friend or follow others in your community. You can access the entire member directory. You can also allow users to join through Facebook, Google, or Twitter. When you're a user, you can also set up a journal entry. So if you want to talk about specific topics or events, you can do that. It also comes with a social API, which allows you to be able to build on top of what comes out of the box. Also, now we get into the professional version, you get high performance caching. So when you're talking about the licensed edition, it's really going to help you dramatically reduce the time for a website to be rendered by almost 80%. You can do the page and excuse me, module caching by, through memory database or disk. So out of the box, it also comes in the professional and enterprise edition. It comes with an e-commerce solution. It supports PayPal and it supports authorized.net. Now, if you're not happy with that and you need more, just head over to the DNN store, check out some more of the more robust solutions. It has advanced content approval and workflow processes if you need to have publish, you need your management to allow for publishing. It supports 5 languages: German, French, Spanish, Italian, and Dutch. There is document management for one library. So that means you can have version history, which allows you to restore older versions of a document, as well as you can create document libraries from scratch. It has the advanced site search module. It's based on Lucene, so you can crawl through Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, as well as PDF documents. Unlimited technical support. And then for the final piece, the Enterprise Edition has 2 main areas that are different. It has content staging. This is excellent if you want to have a staging environment that you can push to a production environment so it doesn't offset your production environment. The other big step that they've completed is the Microsoft SharePoint connector. It's fairly easy to configure into Microsoft SharePoint. What's really good is it just publishes the most current document that is in SharePoint. So overall, I would say there's lots of great features. There's lots of great modules within DNN, but it's even larger as you add in the store. It's even better once you get into the community that supports it. The biggest weakness is that it's the extremely large community. You really have to do your due diligence as an organization to look at the integration.NET new companies out there, because they're not all the same. So this could, depend on whether you have a great experience with .NET Nuke or a lousy one. But at the end of the day, DNN's major strength, undeniably, is the deep community members which support the product. And with the development framework now built on C#, there's really a lot of wiggle room to develop a great web and robust product.
Excellent stuff. Stephen, honestly, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. But, before we let you go, I need to ask Scott this one question about .NET Nuke in particular. Scott, very quickly, kind of talk about .NET Nuke from the business end, really. How are they positioned in the marketplace? Their financial stability. Talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So, they have taken, and this is kind of becoming a theme of these open source community-based projects that are wanting to shift themselves more towards the enterprise. We've talked about this with Drupal in the past, and we will again. They have taken their first round of funding, I think it was in 2009, and they've shifted now to this kind of commercial open source model. And so for them, they're doing quite well, because I think there aren't that many .NET open source options out there. Umbraco is one of them, but there aren't too many in the space. Orchard is one. So they're doing quite well. They own the space. They're definitely a behemoth in the .NET open source market. But I think what they're really doing well is they're taking the advantages of the community that it gives them in terms of some of that innovation and looking to the community for that. But they're looking to themselves and their own developers and their own team to kind of guide that roadmap, right? And to be able to guide what they're taking on next. Stephen talked about their push into social and also their push into the cloud, which will be the future for them. Those things would be very difficult to do if you were just purely a kind of community-based project that wasn't necessarily guided by an organization. And so .NET Nuke has made that shift, and I think made it well to the advantage of being able to get them into the enterprise more and more and deal with some of the sophistications and complexities of an enterprise.
Awesome. Absolutely love it. Excellent stuff. Stephen, honestly, thank you so much for jumping on the show. Let's really appreciate it and giving us a breakdown of everything that is .NET Nuke.
Thank you, and I really appreciate being on.
Excellent. Great stuff indeed. So now we do, in fact, have to go ahead and get to one of the latest segments here on CMS-Connected. That happens to be Rapid Fire. We unleashed it just a couple months ago, and now it's going strong, baby. I absolutely love it. We come to the Rapid Fire segment with Scott Lee, where we basically put a minute or so on the clock, and we basically like to go through some of these great topics that we do, in fact, have for you today. So right now, we're going to be talking about the future of Drupal. Scott, let's talk about this. Drupal playing an important role beyond its traditional base of small companies, government, nonprofit organizations, which has been their mainstay so far up to this point. It's also hit hard the larger organizations of the world. Now, is this something the mid-tier players, such as Sitecore, Extron, EpiServer, should they be worried about this in particular? Yeah, sure. So I think yes. I think I said at the beginning a number of how many months ago was it now? Maybe 6, where I said that one of
the forces in the WCM world, the potential forces in 2012 was going to be able to be Drupal. That if they were to capitalize on the popularity that they have out there and their ability to tap into that network, because they have an awful large client base. It's not just the smaller companies like we've alluded to. It's the very large. It's the Coca-Colas. It's the very large ones also that they're out there serving. Just typically they're serving those smaller marketing-oriented sites. And so nowadays, though, where they're making this push into the enterprise, much like .NET Nuke that we just talked about, where they have commercialized some of this a bit, and they're making that push, I think they are indeed a threat. I think they still lag in some of those kind of underlying complex ability to serve the large enterprise right now, but they're certainly pushing towards that quite quickly, and Acquia is really helping them along the way.
Excellent indeed. All right, let's go ahead and let's get to the next one. We're going to talk about this one very briefly. ePublishing acquires Ellington. So we're going to go ahead. ePublishing has decided to acquire Ellington CMS and Ellington Marketplace, Ellington CMS, a product with a significant portion of its customers being in the publishing and news sectors at this point. Now, it runs such sites as Yale News and Golf Week. Unfortunately, financial terms were really not released, but the acquisition should be complete by the end of this month in particular. Now, what does ePublishing hope to achieve with this acquisition? I mean, this is kind of interesting to see exactly what's taking place right now at this point in time.
It is, and I don't tend to track either ePublishing or Ellington that closely, but what I do know is, what they provide to them, the capability that it now offers is this notion of user-generated content and the ability to kind of socialize your content and have the community be able to interact with it, be able to stress its emphasis, be able to review content, that sort of stuff. So we're taking the traditional publishing model and essentially socializing it in this way. And that's all about that notion of audience engagement and the empowered consumer looking to each other first. So.
Excellent indeed. Okay, let's go ahead and let's talk about Hippo. The Hippo platform goes enterprise really. In Q3 2012, Hippo is actually going to be releasing what they believe to be the first enterprise open source customer experience management platform. Say that 5 times fast. Now, Hippo CMS 7.7 includes real-time behavioral targeting, social publishing, and complete mobile content optimization. Talk to Hippo a little bit in this, this notion of the open source enterprise.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit overzealous by saying that they're the first ones to do this. I think one of the next topics is about Easy Publish, and they've been doing this for a little bit as well, where they've got this optimization of content, and they're using some of those analytics-based and other things. Some of those other CXM or CEM, the customer experience management-oriented capabilities, social publishing, behavioral targeting, analytics, and incorporating that into the thing. I think the big news here is not necessarily they're the first out of the gate in this, but that it's, once again, here it is coming into the enterprise open source model. So it seems to have been a theme a little bit here of the past few topics, this notion of open source and how mature it really is getting. We talked about this at the top of the year, where we said that these guys are really looking to mature, they're really looking to make it space. And here's one where Hippo is much more this commercial open source right out of the gate. They haven't converted to it, but they're doing a really good job driving that roadmap and picking off the pieces they need to be relevant for the enterprise.
Let's go. Let's talk about Easy Systems going to the cloud. Really, a special cloud-based version of Easy Systems, web content management system, will be offered through a new partnership with Deutsche Telekom. Together, the two are actually going to be offering a cloud-based version of Easy Publish for small and medium-sized businesses. Kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I think here again, another theme that we've continued to harp on is the cloud. So here we just heard from Stephen on .NET Nuke, where he was talking about that DNN is going into the cloud, and now I know that this is a big emphasis for Gabby, the CEO of Easy Systems, that she's pushing them into the cloud. I think they've created a pretty significant relationship with some of the cloud players there to offer that capability. So there were some really small companies like Granite Horizon who were doing Easy Systems and an open source, Easy Publish rather, and an open source, sorry, I apologize, in a SaaS-based model where it was in the cloud already. But this is really great news for those who are looking to kind of test the waters, get in the cloud. They care a lot about open source. They want a mature system that is oriented towards the enterprise. I think Easy Publish is a great move for them. And I think others will follow. You're going to see that a lot more.
Let's go ahead and let's talk about a new LMS mod from Kentico. And actually, an interesting product built on the Kentico CMS platform has actually recently been made available. Now, it was CPD Academy, as it's named, was designed for organizations looking to deliver continuing professional development e-learning. This new learning management system offers a clean interface built on proven solution, as they talk to you. Kind of talk about Kentico's new product offering a bit.
Yeah, I like this move for them. We hadn't seen many web content management players who also provide learning management software. And I think learning management systems are, while it's a popular notion, it's been a niche that's been relatively untapped. And I think it's a great move for them, for Kentico specifically, to get into this area, because it seems to be like the next jump. There's another company that we've talked about on here before, Elcom, has always had a learning management capability to their offering out of the gate. They're based out of Australia and have made a big presence in the US here recently in the last year or so. And that was one of the things that set them apart as a product. I think Kentico, facing them head to head, both of them being .NET products, is, I don't know if they're necessarily doing this to keep up with Kentico per se, but I do think this is a great move for them, because learning management and providing the ability to kind of do your online education, whether it's for your customers or whether for your internal employees, is a great next step and an obvious move for a web content management system.
Okay, last thing we're going to be talking about is Microsoft. Now, obviously, we knew there was going to be ripples really across the entire industry right now. When Microsoft announced it was going to be buying Yammer, now there's going to be a lot of people talking about the different products and vendors that are closely tied to the Microsoft machine. Now, one of those companies that reacted the quickest is NewsGator. Now, just 3 weeks after Microsoft agreed to pay $1.2 billion for Yammer, which we talked about, NewsGator announces that it's going to integrate its SharePoint-based application with Yammer. SharePoint again. We're going to be talking about this again, and obviously we have to make sure people note that we're going to be talking about SharePoint coming up in a very, very soon episode of CMS Connected. I want to preview that for you guys as well.
It definitely gets us a lot of viewers. Everybody cares about SharePoint, and certainly so does its ecosystem of partners, as we've talked about. Tim, who was on the show earlier, wrote a blog post for us about a month or so ago when this news first came out of SharePoint's acquisition of Yammer, talking about NewsGator shedding alligator tears about being kind of left out. And here they come in as their obvious answer to this by integrating with them. Again, these guys are going to innovate. They'll continue to be relevant. I think it's a great play for them, obviously, but it's frankly a necessary one.
All right, excellent stuff indeed. That was Rapid Fire, and that'll do it for us here on CMS Connected. As always, absolutely love all the guests and love you guys tuning in as well. So a couple great tweets in there as well. So make sure you guys keep that conversation going. Utilize that CMS Connected hashtag as well. But first and foremost, we have to say thank you very much to both of our sponsors. Really help with this entire show on Falcon Software and of course Digital Clarity Group as well. And want to basically let you guys know that SharePoint 2013, that is going to be the topic of discussion coming up next month, right here on CMS Connected. So for all of our guests, for Ali Kelly, for Tim Walters, for Stephen Medvey, as well as Scott Lewer, I am Tyler Pyron. This right here is CMS Connected on the Pulse Network. We'll see you next time.